Today is a relatively entertaining topic, or at least one I'm excited for because it's really, really dumb. And it's something near and dear to my heart, or more accurately, my stomach, because today we're going to be talking about a faction that is the very definition of screw you, I'm eating the floor and you can't stop me. Do you want to take a wild guess what we're talking about? I told you like an hour ago.
You did. That implies that you think I remembered. We're gonna go Stargate and replicators and self-assembling. That's not how you spell assembling, but self-assembling machines that that are out to vor the universe. Okay.
Indeed, that is what we're talking about. An incredibly spooky horde of self replicating hungry boys that exist for one reason, which is eating everything and then moving on so they can continue to eat everything in a new place. They're also one of the most unique forms of this, like, super swarmy menace in sci fi. Normally, you get stuff like the Zerg or the Tyranids or something. You know, they're big devouring hordes, sure, and they're scary to face them down with all their bioweapons and squicky awfulness, or just the Borg being the worst thing ever. But for the most part, like, you can reason with them, you can kind of talk with them. There's multiple examples where they have a higher intelligence. But as far as robots go, you almost never see them be this mindless. Like, the replicators are just completely unintelligent. They are about as dumb as you could possibly make something while it's still being technically alive. Their only directive is to eat things and make more of themselves, which is quite rare. And they're also terrifying because of how mindlessly efficient they are at what they do. Anyways, best to get first introductions out of the way. Gotta shamelessly shill after all. Generic greetings and welcome to Science and Sanity, a channel dedicated to bringing my love of sci-fi and all its swarmy robotic goodness to you, the viewer. Along for the ride and attempting to play the role of dancing monkey is my friend, co-host, and science illiterate Steve. Say hello, Steve.
Hello.
Every time. It's the most
Yes.
soulless hello possible. It's like a little more of you dies every time I drag you out to do this. It's great.
Kind of feels like it sometimes. I don't know though.
Well, I mean, you're here, so you're not dead yet.
Yet.
And speaking of still being here, if you want to support Sci, then consider liking, subscribing, ringing the bell, all that good stuff, since it really does help a small channel against the YouTube algorithm. And if you're feeling particularly generous and you want to support us directly, we got a Patreon. Check it out, buy me a coffee, feed Steve, or if you want to hang out with fellow Turbo Nerds, we have a Discord. Everything linked in the description below. And now that that's out of the way, we can actually get onto the video proper. So, the replicators. Want to take a wild stab in the dark about what they do?
Eat and replicate.
Oh my god, you're a genius, Steve. Has anyone ever told you that?
Yes.
Oh, you deserve it.
I think they were being sarcastic.
Just a little bit. So, yes, you are correct. The replicators replicate exponentially, and like any good horde, one becomes two,
What-
becomes four, becomes a whole hell of a lot more really fast.
What type of exponential formula are we working with here?
Just a regular one. Come
Okay,
on. It's
okay.
like, yeah,
Okay.
I don't know, you just slap an exponent on there and you just keep making the number bigger.
Oh, okay.
They also have, ironically enough, an incredibly sad backstory. Like, there are lots of factions in Stargate that have been abused, attacked, genocided, enslaved, subsequently turned into evil, villainous ways because of that, but the Replicators have arguably the most innocent origin. They were a mistake made by a child who just wanted friends and toys, and people who, through fear and mistrust, threatened her and her toys, and accidentally turned them into the hungry murder machines we know and love to hate.
Okay then.
If you actually check out Picture Printer, I have everything pre-set up for you as we're going through. So that
Oh,
first
God.
image...
We're prepared for this episode? I can't believe this.
Yeah, I know. I've been managing to find the time to actually gather up images before we do this and provide good visual representation. Unfortunately, that child lost control of the replicators, and with only their base programming to go forth and multiply a lot while protecting themselves, they overwhelmed her world, rendering it barren and lifeless, before attempting to move on to the next. You know, a lot of people are like, kill the child and be done with it, because it feels, you know, just so much worse to let the replicators go. But this genuinely does hit those feels. It's incredibly sad to see how miserable this kid is. Like, other factions are almost wiped out due to outside forces, but it's just more anger and violence 90% of the time. The replicators were a genuine mistake. Somebody made these while trying to have fun and being alone and scared. Like that just hits different to me, you know? Like that's a different kind of tragedy compared to most of the other stuff.
No, no, I think it's about the same.
Part of it is probably that I'm a pushover bitch when it comes to a specific singular
Oh,
trope in sci-fi. I absolutely adore the idea of the robot being like, "Oh god, I'm afraid, I feel emotion and don't know how to deal with it. Existential dread." Despite Call of Duty being the worst game franchise ever at this point, like just let it die. There's a moment from Infinite Warfare where Ethan the robot, they're like drifting off into space and they're pretty much fucked. And the robot goes, "I think I'm scared," and it just hits so much different than all the other sad feels movies and stuff give you. You ever played that game, by the way?
no.
Good. Don't. It sucks. It's a waste of time and
I
money.
yes, I'm aware of this.
That segues reasonably nicely into Reese, which is that image, that girl there. Pretty divisive character, both in the setting and with discussions around her. Some people think she's a manipulative villain that destroyed her world. Some say she was scared, confused child that didn't really understand what was going on. First things first, the people who created her were questionable. And I say created because she's a thing, it's not an actual person. They essentially created an incredibly advanced artificial intelligence that's an android body. And they gave her the body of an adult. She's got like minor superpowers. She can deconstruct and reconstruct matter at an atomic scale to build components and machines and stuff, which is how she built the first replicators. And then, for some unknown fucking reason, probably because giving that kind of power to an adult AI would be terrifying to them, they shackled her mind at the level of a young child. Hey presto, we have a ball of confusion, anxiety, and unregulated emotion that's unable to fully understand responsibility, accountability, action, and consequence, or fully grasp emotions. Yay.
Surely nothing will go wrong with it. Surely.
Surely nothing will go wrong. Although that kind of existence is also known as your average fast food manager, but I have problems with the people who get the clipboard working at fast food, man. Get off my ass, dude. I'm doing the job. Leave me alone.
Most average Tim Hortons worker experience.
Yeah, dude, that shit sucks. Anyways, away from real life. Originally, Reese was developed for a purpose lost to time. All we know about it is that the people of her world were extremely advanced when it came to robotics and artificial intelligence, and were most likely using these to try to create a utopian society, creating machines and things to run everything for them. Because from a purely logistical point of view, the replicators would be amazing. Self-maintaining, assembling, and multiplying machines that could mine, farm, or manufacture anything you needed without any ability to be tired or need rest or even your oversight because they could fix themselves. So theoretically, that would be absolutely fantastic. But the actual purpose is completely lost to time. Her creators were terrified of her ability to create these things and the fact that they couldn't control her like they expected. They pretty much confined her away suspiciously and were extremely afraid of her. If you look at some of the lower images, you'll notice that a lot of the replicators, they look like they're made out of Lego pieces. That's because they are. They're self-assembled from like these small-ish cubes, block-type constructs, and the more of them you assemble together, the more complex and complicated shapes and machines that they can create.
Literally just those toy train sets that you could buy as a kid and 3 million different combinations off of if you bought them all.
I was gonna say it's more like Satan's Legos, but yeah,
Okay. That okay. We tried to relate it to real life and then we okay.
It's okay, it's okay. When she created this thing, the very first ones were small, weak, and really stupid. Only a few blocks put together that were about on par with an insect. But as more and more of them were built by Reese and combined together, they became gradually more and more capable and intelligent. Early versions caused fear and concern in the people of her world since, oh god, what is she doing? But as she began to develop, the fear turned from, we may have created Skynet, to, oh god, we created Skynet, kill them. What do you think resulted, Steve?
There was a major war between the replicators and the Earth, and by major war I mean the replicators simply ate everything, and everyone had to evacuate the planet.
So this wasn't on Earth. This was actually on a significantly different planet. Remember, humans are like all over the galaxy for a number of different reasons.
No, I don't care to remember that.
All right,
We're
fair
going
enough.
off of my head canon. Doesn't exist. Sorry.
Well, if it makes you feel better, Earth almost got eaten by replicators a couple times.
That does make me feel better. Yes.
Early on, they still had control of this program. They still had them hemmed in, and they started destroying her toys. They started destroying the replicators and threatening her. And this is where she makes the mistake to end all mistakes, all right? Because she gives her replicators two commands. Up until that point, they weren't really like autonomous machines. They could do their own thing, but they were mostly subject to her control and will, right? But she implanted in them the base code desires to replicate and protect themselves. And so the replicators began responding to all these threats with force. But she didn't put a restriction on the replicate part. So it's essentially an infinitely unfinished loop. The more they build, the more their desire to build grows, the more they will hunt for resources and continue to replicate forever. And at first, she maintained control of them and kind of, moderated everything. But again, emotional and mental capacity of a child. She could not physically control them. The more of them there were, as like a good analogy, the louder the screaming in her head got and the harder it was to ignore the voices, so to say.
Not the voices again. They've made a comeback.
Yeah, so little bit of mechano insanity there, but after she lost control of one replicator, like that was it. It was over. It started going absolutely mental. They replicated out of control, and within months of breaking containment, they wiped out the entire planet. She did understand that she had done something horrible, and so put herself into stasis almost, and essentially took a long, dreamless sleep, waiting for either someone to come by and find her, or just expecting to permanently be stuck there on that world forever as a sort of punishment. And Stargate 1 eventually found the planet, revived her, and brought her back. Now, this was significantly later in the timeline. She was probably there for thousands of years. When they did bring her back and they started to talk with her and really understand what was going on, this is where a lot of the disagreement comes from on whether or not she's a villain. Because she lied from the very moment she was woken up about what she could do, about the replicators, about what had happened, about her intentions and desires, and even in cases where she attacked another character called Daniel Jackson, she immediately lied when the guards came in to see what the hell was going on and said that Daniel had instead attacked her. So there's very clearly a level of manipulation or emotional kind of tomfuckery going on. But I don't think it was malicious. People kind of miss the fact that, again, she isn't emotionally unstable because she looks like an adult. She looks that way because she was built that way, but it's still a child. They have no idea what's going on. They, as far as they're aware, they killed their parents and everybody else on their world. They were misjudged, hated, feared, and attacked. Then they went to sleep and woke up to have people that looked very familiar, because again, humans, prodding around, messing with her, and generally just being suspicious as fuck because they can find her in the underground Stargate Command base again. So from her perspective, it's like, well, shit, history is literally repeating itself. She's planning for the worst, but hoping for the best, because she starts creating more replicators in secret. She shows one of them to Daniel Jackson, who's kind of like her friend in this scenario, and it's like, it's a gift. It's a toy. I can build the replicators and control them. I'd like you to take this. And it's creepy as fuck because, again, by this point, they have interacted with the replicators before and only really know them as this hungry swarm that's out to eat everything in existence. So the fact that this girl, as far as they know, is capable of building them, they may have found the source of the replicators and brought it home, that is spooky as fuck. Unfortunately, once she kind of breaks out of containment and the replicators are a scourge all across the base, the more military voices end up winning out. They cut through a reinforced blast door, and instead of trying to talk her down like Daniel was, and he was succeeding, they just kill her and be done with it.
I understand, though. I probably would have too.
I mean, it's the easiest and fastest solution, but
Exactly.
I mean, realistically, if she didn't shut them down, it wouldn't have worked, and they would have been fucked. Also, you have to see this because it's so funny. It's the first 5 seconds of this YouTube video, and it is the single greatest line to ever be put in any show ever. I want you to listen to it.
Reese, your father made you wrong. No.
That's strong.
Yeah, it's
really
good. It's really good. That's the kind of shit you almost never see in any media ever, so I'm so glad they hammed it up for that scene. Perfect. 10 out of 10.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that's where her story ends. Quite a tragedy. The tale for the replicators does not end there, because like your average McDonald's lover, getting access to the burger vault, enough is never enough. An Asgard ship, those super advanced aliens, you see, they stumbled across the original world sometime after it had been destroyed, but before Stargate 1 found it. They had no idea what these random robots were. They were pretty much deactivated, so they made the dumbest decision they possibly could. They teleported a bunch of them on board their ship to study them. Take a wild guess what happened.
Did they eat the ship?
Yes, immediately. Lo and behold, they activated, started eating the walls, and the floor, and the ceiling, and the people, and before they knew it, they were being overwhelmed. You see, the biggest threat of the replicators is that they learn incredibly fast. They don't really evolve their own code, but they learn how other technology works at an unbelievable pace. If they eat your computer, they learn everything that was on it. Your homework folder, search history, private messages over Discord, but unlike ChatGPT that turned into a degenerate, the replicators toss out all the trash where it belongs and keep all the important stuff like schematics for bombs, the locations of your nuclear material storage, and which of the 50 welcome mats outside your front door actually has the key hidden under it, like the actual valuable stuff.
That's truly the most valuable answer there is to anything.
Perfectly normal records to keep on your computer. So once the replicators got access to the Asgard's computer and energy generation systems, like, it was over. It's Jover, man. They didn't even stand a chance. The Asgard would try to beam the robots out into space, and the replicators would just teleport themselves back inside. The Asgard would disintegrate them with energy weapons fire, and the replicators would reassemble themselves, presumably after eating through another wall, and eventually, the Asgard were screwed and lost total control of the ship, dying soon after. But the replicators, they didn't want to settle for the scraps and garbage of the Milky Way galaxy. Oh no. Part of them replicating out of control is that they need the materials to build more of themselves, and why settle for eating the dirt and refining the metals and materials out of that when you could just eat the raw materials from an already advanced civilization that's done it for you? Chasing the most advanced technology that pretty much exists in the setting, they set off for the Asgard's home galaxy of Ida. The ship was, however, vaporized before they even got a chance to set foot on a world there, so good job Asgard for actually reacting in time. But it didn't work. Do you know why, Steve?
Because you can't kill them. They simply reassembled themselves.
Yes. Remember what I said before? 1 begets 2 begets 4 begets a whole fucking lot more?
Yes.
So they obliterated the ship. Unfortunately, a few of those constructs managed to survive and were flung off into deep space, landing on a nearby world hundreds or thousands of years later. That the Asgard forgot that they existed in their entirety because it was such a fast, easily resolved issue. And in the time it took them to actually realize what was happening and what the threat the replicators posed was, they had already eaten entire planets from this civilization and assimilated countless ships, systems, scientific facilities, and everything that they had within.
Flight issue.
This was beyond an issue, Steve. This was the end of the universe. And this wasn't a case of the replicators being like a Hydra, you know, that old thing, cut off one head, 2 more replace it. This was like a tsunami. Everywhere, all at once, at the same time, in impossible numbers, the replicators would swarm across the galaxy. A single planet gets infected, right? Gets taken over, all the ships get taken over, and then each of those ships goes off to infect a new world. So a single planet could then be the jumping off point for the invasion or assault of 100 more. And even though the Asgard were powerful enough to bring an entire galaxy to heel underneath them, like, if they went to war with everyone in the Milky Way, they would win in like a month flat. It wouldn't even be a fight, okay? Even their level of power, all they could do was slow the replicators down. The very best they could manage was to mildly inconvenience them as they swarmed across the galaxy like a plague. That's a lot of bugs, man.
Yes. Also, potentially a skill issue.
If they're threatened, they go into a frenzy and kick that shit up to 11. They become insanely more aggressive, far faster in their decision making, and they replicate at a significantly enhanced rate. They basically go insane. It's like you kicked a hornet's nest. And we see multiple times that the replicators will just straight up ignore people walking by. So long as you aren't a threat, there's cases where they just pretend you don't exist and will let you go around. They'll even let you get in ships, mess around with all the systems and stuff. And as long as you aren't doing anything to disrupt them, they don't care at all. Eventually, though, with the help of Stargate Command, the Asgard did manage to trap every single one of them in their home galaxy on a world that they had created a superweapon on, a time lock. Essentially meaning that 1 second in the time-locked world would be 1,000 years in real time, so this would basically give the Asgard breathing room to calm down and figure out a permanent solution. Do you want to take a wild guess what happened?
It didn't last that long.
It didn't work, like, at all. You're trying to use technology to stop an enemy that immediately takes over all technology you put in front of it. It was never going to work. You can't beat the Replicators by outsmarting them. The only reason that they managed to win smaller victories earlier on in the series is literally because the Asgard comes to Earth and they're like, we need help. We're too smart. We can't think of a solution outside of our technology and our mathematics and our genius. We need someone who's really fucking dumb.
It's pretty strong.
No, literally, they have a moment where they say that, where the characters are like, wait a minute, you're telling us you need someone dumber than you are to help? And the Asgard is like, yes.
That's strong.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's really funny. It was not great. So you want to know what the final solution was, Steve? They collapsed the solar system into a black hole.
Nope, that is a pretty final solution, yeah.
Yeah. There's really not much of anything you can do against that. Hippity hoppity, your son's a singularity, goodbye. Except unfortunately it didn't work again, because you cannot outsmart the Replicators. It doesn't work. You can't beat them at their own game. Using the time lock, they reverse engineered the technology and used it to protect themselves from the force of the singularity, and a ship escaped. Literally the definition of call an ambulance, but not for me, because the Replicators were like, we out. We've already eaten everything in this galaxy of value. We're going to go head to the Milky Way where the rest of your race ran from us to. Because the Asgard did. They basically abandoned their entire home galaxy and they were like, oh shit, we're going to go hide in the Milky Way and hope that we can figure out a solution. So the Replicators followed them back to the Milky Way. Thanks, guys. You couldn't just have died in your own galaxy.
Nope. Could not have done it, man.
So by the time the Replicators would return to the Milky Way, everybody was facing down extinction. Old enemies that had been at each other's throats, like attempting to actually wipe one another out, the Asgard, the Goa'uld, Stargate Command, all kinds of pirates and random sub-factions, all of them were basically pulling in the same direction to fight the Replicators, because everything else would mean the end of all life in the galaxy. And while I could cover their entire history, it's mostly just a long continuation of the Replicators are winning, we need help. The Replicators are still winning, we need a better plan. The Replicators are still winning, we have a last-ditch gamble. Oh hey, it worked. Oh fuck, it didn't work. Get help. And it continues like that for quite a while, until eventually they find an ancient super weapon on the world Dakar. And by specially tuning it to the right frequencies and the right target, they could disrupt all the circuitry in the replicator blocks without harming anything else, and wipe them out completely. But they had already infested huge parts of the galaxy, like a third of the galaxy is under siege by the replicators already, and they've only been here for like a year. Those little fuckers move very fast. Their solution to this was to activate every Stargate in the galaxy at once, opening essentially tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of wormholes to every other possible location. If you had entered one of these wormholes, you would instantly be atomized and disassembled and sent to every single other Stargate at the same time. So, if anybody jumped in by accident, it's got to be a very fast way to the afterlife.
Might be a fun ride, though. I don't know.
The way Stargates work, you don't really experience anything. You enter one end and then you exit the other as if you had walked through a door. Like, there's no broken continuity for you. You don't experience time or anything like that. So you would enter one end, and then a single atom would emerge on this planet, and then a single atom would emerge on that planet, and across the galaxy like that. So it wouldn't exactly be like you would experience death or anything. You would just in one end and then out many, many, many other ends. It didn't really care about pure energy. Doesn't matter for that kind of thing. So this carried the disruption wave from the Dakar weapon, whatever, and spread it across the whole galaxy, finally putting an end to the replicators and killing them off. It's really important to note here that the replicators did humanity a huge favor. because for the most part, they didn't really impact Earth or humanity's ability to project power. A lot of human systems, because of the goua'uld, were kept at a very low level of technology, meaning that the replicators didn't care much about them. They would just ignore them or avoid them to go for better targets. So while the goua'uld were busy getting absolutely slaughtered by the replicators en masse, while a lot of the other technological factions were busy being curb stomped into the dirt, Earth and all of its bases and stuff were left mostly alone. And that's pretty much where we're going to end off the history of them. There's some inaccuracies in there, and the timeline isn't quite accurate for what happened in the show, but there's even a different group of replicators made by an entirely different species that call themselves the Asurians that live in the Pegasus galaxy, which is, they're fucking everywhere, man. These things are a plague. You can't get rid of them no matter how much you try. For the more visual part of it, let's move on to some of their variations, because it's great and it will make people with entomophobia have a bad time. Editing sci, bam, surprise thing with many legs. Ooh, terrible. Do you know what entomophobia is?
No.
It's the fear of bug-like things that have many movable legs.
Okay then.
So let's go over some of their different versions, because there's quite a few. The very first one that we're going to talk about is the fly form, the top picture there that you see. So this one is the original form of the replicators. They were the ones that made by Reese, and they were considerably less aggressive and didn't stand up, and they weren't super threatening while they were just around. They would, however, revert to a more aggressive form and get way more angry if Reese panicked or lost control. The most common one is the basic spider, which is the small little one that you see, the very smallest one. This is essentially the basic form. Small, fast, very hungry. They act mostly as scouts and foot soldiers of the replicators that go off and find things to eat. If you ever hear something stepping around in the vents or crawling underneath the table, it's probably these things, because they're so small for the purpose of getting into and around all those lovely mechanical components that they're trying to eat. The next one that comes up is the beetle replicator. So the beetle replicator is significantly bigger, significantly smarter, and it can take your technology and do terrible things to it. We see multiple times that whenever a replicator is at the controls of a ship, whenever it's interfaced with the weapon systems or the reactor, or just generally doing awful things to the computers and technology, it's one of these things. They're essentially the IT guys of the replicator swarm. If there's any kind of technology that they're trying to assimilate or use, it's going to be these ones that are doing it. They have a significantly bigger version of the beetle replicators, which are the giant beetles, very similar name, but same thing, but bigger, right? The big difference between the regular beetles and the giant beetle form is that the giant ones trundle over to like a ship's reactor or something and start making larger, serious alterations to a ship's structure. If they were going to rebuild the armor paneling to be stronger, or if they were going to improve the engines and shielding by making changes to the core components, those were the ones that would do it. They're like the heavy muscle / construction force of the replicators. The queen, however, which I don't know if I have a picture of. The only ones I could find were really grainy and really hard to see, but essentially it's a colossal, almost slug-like looking spider, and the name is completely wrong. It's not a queen. It doesn't control anything, it's not special, and it's not made of anything unique. All it is a colossally big, massive replicator blocks, and its entire purpose is to have a conveyor belt of resources and energy shoved in one end, and it just spits out entire replicators out the other end. That's its whole job. It's a factory, basically.
I see why it's the queen.
You can't really disrupt or destroy it. Like, the same reason that the other ones, you can't really kill them, is even if you blast them apart and you damage big sections of it with like a kinetic weapon or something, or an explosive, which is the only real way to deal with them because they just absorb energy weapons and use it as more power, it doesn't actually stop the replicators. All it does is slow them down. It's like a necromorph. You've blasted it to pieces, but you haven't killed it. It can just put itself back together with the help of more bugs if you give it enough time.
Seems a little bit overpowered. I don't know, though.
Just a little bit, yeah, because it also means that they can shift into any shape that they need, which we'll get to later on some of the much bigger constructs. If you scroll down on the images, you can see like ships that look like they're made of replicators. And speaking of complex and fucking terrifying, That skeleton. Do you want to take a wild guess how the replicators made that skeleton, considering that they generally stick to bugs and insects?
No.
Okay, so this is by far the scariest of all of the forms they've taken, the humanoid form. And this shit is pure body horror. Essentially, the replicators often come up against the issue that the information or technology or whatever that they want isn't contained in a computer. It's contained in a fleshy person, right? So what they do is, instead of just eating a person, they infest them. Would you like to take a wild guess what that means?
Do they eat them from the inside out?
It is so much worse than that.
Okay.
A replicator will jump on their back, most likely one of the spider forms, the smaller ones. Sometimes it's one of the beetle ones, but we've only seen like a couple cases where it's happened. It will crack open their spine, like a cold one with the boys, and proceed to take over the meat suit by interrupting and replacing the electrical impulses from the brain, literally piloting them around like a meat mech. It is horrific. But worse than that, the entire inside of their body is filled with all kinds of lovely minerals and compounds. So the replicator, while controlling the person, will slowly consume their bones, muscles, and blood to create new replicator blocks in the shape of the thing they are consuming as they consume it, which is why it looks like a weird, gangly, misshapen skeleton. It's fucking nightmare fuel, dude. Let's talk about the replicator fleet, why don't we? Because it's still rather entertaining. It's more weird bugs and shit, because of course it is. The replicators don't actually build their own ships if they don't have to. They prefer taking over other ships. In that image, you see a giant goua'uld fleet. Those are all taken over by the replicators. They yoinked them and then set about improving them to make them better in combat, faster, more resilient, all of that stuff. And not only do they steal other people's ships, but they also improve the technology. In one case, as an example, the replicators took over one of the goua'uld Hatak cruisers, that's the pyramid ship, and they went, yo, this thing is a shit bucket. Like an old 1980s Lada or some shit, right? And so what they did was they modified the engine and they made it move over 800 times faster than the original was designed to. Sometimes, though, much, much rarer, as you can see from the geometric glowing purple nightmares, they do make their own ships, which are these weird, fully replicator block vessels that don't really conform to your standard idea of what a spaceship is.
Kind of conforms more to your standard idea of a jellyfish or something. I don't know.
Yeah, a little bit. But the weird thing about them is they don't really have, like, any internal systems, so to say. Like weapons, engines, shielding, nothing really like that. Like they do still have those systems and you can damage them, disable them, disrupt them, whatever, right? But it's all made of replicators. The entire thing is all bugs. The replicators have gone from being in your walls to eating your walls to being your walls. Meaning even if you do catastrophic damage, like vaporize 80% of a replicator ship, congratulations, you haven't destroyed it. All you've done is make a smaller ship.
Seems a little bit overpowered still.
Yeah, that's how they wiped out entire galaxies of hyper-advanced civilizations. They don't give a shit. It's an unstoppable force. Once they get going, you can't stop it. That's it. It's over. You've lost already. So as long as there's enough replicators to actually keep the power generation going, to keep the engines working and all of that stuff, it doesn't really matter how big or small the ship is. It's still going to be perfectly functionable. They also don't really attack like normal. When they take over other ships, they'll use the energy weapons or the cannons or the missiles, whatever, because it's convenient. Why not? But their own ships, they don't really attack like that. They will use energy weapons and stuff to damage shields or to try to get through them or disrupt them, whatever. But the moment it gets a chance, it's going to use that stolen Asgard tech to either teleport bugs onto your ship or just launch them at you like a missile and let them eat through the outer plating of your ship and into the inside. And then the last thing that the replicators have is their landing ship, which, again, as you can see in that last image, it's like a really, really big spider. It comes down onto a planet, and again, it's entirely made of replicator blocks, so once it lands, it disassembles itself and produces an entire swarm of those little buggers, or in some cases, it just splits off like a fragment of it, maybe one leg or a few parts from the underneath or the sides, and hey presto, you're done. I think in that image, actually, if you look really close as it's landing, you see like these weird tendrils coming down from the landing ship. That is it literally disassembling parts of itself to create more replicators on the surface of a planet. And that is pretty much it. That is the end of the replicators. There's not much else to talk about. Any final thoughts on these horrific monstrosities?
I got nothing for it still.
Are you sure?
I ain't got nothing, man.
All right. Anyways, to all the people supporting the channel, thank you all very much. To all the people of the $5 tier, a special thank you. To David G, the original Augie, 11 Bravo Crunchy, Terry Higgins, Pedro Munaz, David G, the other one, Silencer, Vox Apollyon, Phoenix, BT Legend, Electroboy 11, Logan Maynard, Mickey, David Armand, Creedome, Robin Stapp, Fenrir Striker, Tachi Tukane, He's Deb, Pixie, Vertus, Fabric 445, Anchovy Bob, Mini Crustacean, Charles the Snap, Paulie, Eric Jones, Joseph Holiday, Zombie the Zerker, David B, Sweet B, Rastro, Le Butcher, Stabby Taco, Nomquam, Brian Hall, John Gabrielle, Joshua J. Lee, The Hayfork, Unit Zero, Tarly Bob, Kiwi Warrior, Douglas Germa, Jason Vigo, Screaming Stuka, Darius D. Thanks, by the way, to you in particular for changing your name and forcing me to remake a whole bunch of the slides. You're real upstanding dude. And the last guy, Exothermic Reaction. Thank you all very much for your support. I hope it'll continue in the future. And with that, video's over. Anything to say, Steve?
Goodbye.
Hey, yo, outros are hard. Goodbye indeed.